Cycling injuries occur mostly because of hours spent over handlebars and saddles. Unless a fall or collision happens, biking injuries have a chronic pattern. Preventions such as gradual increases in training and a professional cycle fit can help tremendously. In this section, we'll focus on neck pain and patellar tendinitis. Neck pain is very common in cyclists. What happens is a cyclist is hunched over the handlebars for hours at a time, which extends the neck and pulls in the shoulders and stretches the trapezius muscle. Those are the main muscles you want to focus on when you're relieving neck tension for your athlete. First of all, you want to go ahead and start in the pec major. Start with some nice broad compressions along this area. Make sure that you include the pec minor, which is up higher and inserts into the coracoid process of the scapula. Now what I'm doing here is actually stretching the tissue away from the origin and towards the insertion. So I'm compressing this area. You'll also want to do it the other way. Do compressions from the insertion to the origin. Go ahead and hold the arm like this, and you're pushing this way. Now if this hurts your wrist because of the extension, you can go ahead and use a fist. I've even sometimes used my forearm like this. Do some circular friction concentrated around that origin. You'll find tender points and adhesions, and you'll just want to break those up by nice multi-directional circular friction all along the origin, and also focus on the insertion point. You can do this with your thumb or your fingers, whatever you're comfortable with. I always like to finish my treatment with a little bit of stretching. So what I do is I'll hold my hand on the origin of the muscle, and I'll take the arm in my other hand and I'll pull them in opposite directions. This gives a really nice stretch to both the pec major and the pec minor. So I'll put my hand right at the origin and I'll stretch back. Make sure to check in with your client. Make sure that that's comfortable. You feel that stretch? Is it comfortable for you?
Yes, it is.
Great. Next, you'll want to be addressing the trapezius area and also the extensors of the neck. So you'll start with the trapezius. Do some broad compressions down this area. I like to use the flat heel of my hand when I'm working down and work back up. Use a nice stretching, broadening technique with the sides of my hands and put my hands kind of in a praying position, and then I'll push out. This really broadens those tissues. Cover the entire trapezius area, the base of the neck, clear up to the top of the trapezius. Start with some compressions up here. Again, if this extends your wrist too much, you can go ahead and use your fists. Pushing on the top of that trapezius. Broaden the tissue in this area again, down along the top of the shoulders, into the acromion process. Good. And then you want to go ahead and address any specific tender points that you've felt while assessing the tissues. If you find one, go ahead and push in and do some circular friction, checking in with your client to make sure that that's not too painful for them. Now I really want you to focus on the tops of these trapezius muscles when you do your frictions. This is where you'll find the most adhesions and the most tender points. So really focus on these. Apply some nice petrissage. Now I want to show you how to stretch the trapezius actively. It helps decrease tension and relax the trapezius muscles by lengthening them. Push down on the scapula and then have your client actively, with about 20% of their strength, push up into my hand. Go ahead and push up into my hand, Justin, and hold this for 10 seconds. And then go ahead and let them release and push. If you can push the scapula down for me, good. I've got another hand just on the back of the occiput to help provide some traction and some stretch to the insertion site of this trapezius. And go ahead and push up. And relax. And go ahead and depress your scapula some more. I'm not pushing at all. Good. Put some tension there and go ahead and push up. Hold for 10 seconds. And you want to do this about 3 times. Now we can go ahead and address the neck extensors. Give some nice warming petrissage to this area. You're warming not only the extensors of the neck, you're also warming the ligamentum nuchae. It connects with the top of the head to the spinous process on the neck. And address that by a nice stretching, lengthening technique on that area. And finish off at these points, about C7, T1, and the top of the occiput on the head. So some more petrissage, encompassing the back of the head, the suboccipitals, the sides of the neck, all the extensors, and then a nice stretch on that ligamentum nuchae again. Find the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae and do some circular friction around them. Again, this can be fairly painful for your athlete, especially if they're tight and contracted from being extended for hours. You'll work all the way up to the suboccipitals and find the tendons of the trapezius and do some circular friction on those also. Working all the way out across the suboccipital area. And again, from the middle, pulling, circular friction. And out laterally on both sides. And if you find a tender point or something that feels adhered, go ahead and press in and do a little bit of circular friction in that area. Don't rush around these areas. It feels good to your athlete, and you're also releasing a lot of tension. There's lots of little trigger points in this area that you'll need to address. Part of helping relieve tension in the neck in a cyclist is going to be stretching out those extensors that have been contracted. So what we're going to do is go ahead and have Justin drop his chin to his chest until he feels a stretch in his extensor muscles. What you want to make sure when you're telling someone to do this stretch is not to let the shoulders raise up. So make sure that their shoulders are pressing down and the chin comes to the chest. And they'll hold this for about 15 to 20 seconds. You feel that stretch? Mm-hmm. And then go ahead and come back up. And shrug the shoulders a little bit. Release that tension. Good. And then go ahead and have him repeat that procedure one more time. Chin to chest, keeping the shoulders down. You might want to go ahead and actively put your hands on the top of their shoulders and press them down so that they get a feeling of what that stretch feels like with the shoulders depressed. Patellar tendonitis is a localized pain in the patellar tendon. Sports that require a lot of jumping or explosive movements are really susceptible to patellar tendonitis. One of the main focuses of your massage will be to release the tension in the quadricep muscles, therefore releasing the tension on the patellar tendon itself. Start with some deep effleurage to this area. Now remember, the vastus lateralis reaches clear around to the back of the leg, so you want to make sure and include that too. Bring some blood to the area with a little circular friction. Loosening the area. You're also trying to assess for places that may have tender points. You want to go ahead and search those out and do some circular friction around those areas to help alleviate these tender points. Because the vastus lateralis is so broad, I like to go ahead and use my forearm for this. Start at the knee and push down, lengthening the tissues. You're going to want to use a little bit of pressure on this area. So make sure to check with your athlete to make sure that this isn't too painful for them. This helps broaden and warm the tissues. I'm going to use my forearm in this position also, working all the way down from the top of the knee and down. If you prefer, you can use both sides at once. And once you've released the tension in this area, that's when you start to focus on the patellar tendon itself. Create fibroblast activity by going across the fiber. Make sure that you don't cause too much pain. This area is already inflamed and you don't want to aggravate it too much. All the way from the tibial tuberosity, working up to the base of the patella. And then after this exercise, you'll want to go ahead and apply ice to the patellar tendon itself and stretch out the quadricep muscles to further relax and reduce tension. Once again, I've placed ice in a paper towel to help protect the skin from the ice pack itself. Apply this directly to the patellar tendon and hold it there for about 10 minutes until numbness sets in. Do this 2 to 3 times a day. To stretch the quadricep muscles, you want to actively engage them. So what I'm going to have Justin do is go ahead and have him bring up his leg to tension, and I'll hold him there. And then I'm going to have him push back on my arm with 20% of his strength and hold for about 10 to 15 seconds. Good, and release. Now what I'm going to have him do is actively contract the antagonistic muscle group. So what I'm going to have him do from this point is pull up his leg as close as he can to his glute. So go ahead and pull up your leg a little bit more. Good. And hold. And then I'm going to have you go ahead and push down on my arm here, and we're going to hold for 10. Good. And release. And can you bring up your leg anymore? Good. All right, and hold. And press down. Good, and release. So you do that about 3 times, and then go ahead and shake out your client, and they'll be all stretched and ready. Swimmers will train for hours in the water. Most of the injuries you will encounter will be from overuse. Swimmers are susceptible to injuries in the shoulder regions. The shoulder is highly mobile, which sacrifices stability in the joint. In this section, we'll focus on the rotator cuff. I've positioned Sean in a side lying position. I'm going to go ahead and put a pillow on his head and extend his arm over his head for his comfort. Address all of these muscles that act on the scapula first before we address the actual rotator cuff itself. So let's start with the serratus anterior. Go ahead and do your compression strokes, bringing blood to the area. Then you're going to want to go ahead and broaden that muscle out to relieve some of the tension on it. I put my hands together and push laterally on either side. While you're in the side lying position, it's also a very good idea to address the lats, which also internally rotate the shoulder. Now notice I'm doing my broadening techniques clear out to the rib cage here. Make sure that you get those fibers also. And from this position we'll continue on to the lats. Again with some nice compression. I'm pushing into the lat area, the latissimus dorsi. Now we can go ahead and broaden that muscle out. Remember now, it's a long, wide, flat muscle. So you're going to want to start at the top and go all the way down to the side. Clear up over the area, across the shoulder joint. Remove the pillow. And this way, we can go ahead and address the subscapularis. Carefully reach underneath the lat muscle and start feeling around for the subscapularis muscle. And once you locate it, stay there and just move the humerus back and forth into external and internal rotation. Take your hand out, relocate another spot on the subscapularis, and again perform some internal and external rotation. This will help loosen the muscles and really bring blood to that area. Now we'll go ahead and address the pectoralis major muscle. Do some compressions with the pads of your fingers all the way from the origin to the insertion. Again, bringing blood to the area. And then you're going to want to go ahead and broaden the tissues. Traction the elbow and push across the muscles. Stretching that tissue. Bringing blood to the area. Do some circular friction around the origin. All the way out to the insertion of the muscle. Now we're going to go ahead and have our client roll over into a prone position so that we can further address the trapezius muscles, the rhomboids, and the rotator cuff muscles. Start your compressions along the trapezius. Make sure that you do compressions on the top part of the trapezius. Now go ahead and spread that area out, broadening the tissues. This is also getting the rhomboids underlying the trapezius area. Now you want to go ahead and specifically address areas at the top of the trapezius and also around the rhomboids. You'll do that with circular friction, looking for places of adherence. And when you find something, just go ahead and hold and do some nice, slow circular friction in that area. And then move on. Check spaces by the spine, as well as along the medial border of the scapula. Again, addressing these areas with circular friction, looking for tight areas. And when you find one, you'll go ahead and press into it with little circular frictions. And then go ahead and finish out the trapezius and the rhomboids with a nice, deep effleurage. This will help further relax the muscles and decrease tension. Now we're going to directly address the rotator cuff muscles. Working on rotator cuff muscles can be very painful for your athlete. So a good idea is to go ahead and put them in a shortened state by actually raising the elbow up a little bit. This will help decrease pain when you're working on these very specific, very tendinous, tight areas. Address the infraspinatus, which originates from the infraspinatus fossa and inserts onto the head of the humerus. Do little circular frictions. What you're trying to do with this stroke is bring blood to the area and increase elasticity to the tendons. One muscle that you're really going to want to address is the supraspinatus muscle. Work that area from the origin at the supraspinatus fossa. Little circular frictions, again bringing blood to the area. If this is too painful for your athlete, go ahead and shorten that muscle all the way to the insertion on the top of the greater tubercle of the humerus. The last thing you want to do for the rotator cuff is go ahead and address the deltoid, especially the anterior, with some petrissage. The anterior is responsible for internal rotation. And this is a main action of a swimmer who is doing freestyle. And this concludes our rotator cuff injury series.